Tonight, we're joined by Senator John Tester of Montana, a member of the Banking Committee, which has all this on its shoulders. If you have to explain to one of your constituents out west right now, Senator, what's wrong with this bailout, what would you say?
I would say that small business and working families and family farm agriculture aren't enough of the focus. And I know that Polson and Bernanke would probably disagree with me on that, but that's just how I feel coming out of the hearing.
Is that because they come from that background, from the big banks in New York, the big bank investment banks, that they think about their own kind and they don't think about the little guy?
Well, that might be it. It might be the fact that I just don't think the questions got answered that were asked today, and that's a big part of it too. And when I heard the answers, I got the impression from the answers that Wall Street was taken care of pretty well on this, and not so much for the little guy, not so much for the small business person or the working family or the family farmer.
Is anybody in Wall Street going to pay for this? Or are they all going to end up with their golden parachutes, with their high salaries, with their high incomes, and somehow the taxpayer or whoever it is down the road 20, 30 years from now pay for the borrowing the government's going to engage in?
Well, I don't think there's a doubt about this. It's our kids and our grandkids that are going to be ending up taking the brunt of this. We don't pay for a lot of stuff that goes on down here. Because of supplemental budgets with the war in Iraq and now this $700 billion, the debt limit's being raised to $11.3 trillion. We've got a real problem, and I think that's getting back to the Banking Committee and this whole issue. This is part of what concerns me about going into the future, and is this going to cause the markets to be even worse and our U.S. Treasury notes to be rated lower.
Well, let's take a look at Secretary Paulson today. Here's what he said, Senator.
We need to build upon this spirit and enact this bill quickly and cleanly, and avoid slowing it down with provisions that are unrelated or don't have broad support. This troubled asset purchase program on its own is the single most effective thing we can do to help homeowners, the American people, and to stimulate our economy.
You know, it amazes me when somebody comes from Wall Street and instructs us to behave cleanly. Cleanly. That's an interesting metaphor. After all this overselling of housing, this balloon mortgages, everything that was meant to get people in debt they couldn't handle, all this derivative wealth that you can't even explain where the production came from. What do these guys do to make themselves billionaires? You can't even figure it out. And then they come out and say, we want a clean bill. What is that about, the word clean? Does that mean don't change anything here? It's a Republican bill. Let it stand.
Boy, Chris, I guess what I would tell you is, and I only heard part of what you had to say because my doggone earpiece keeps coming out, but the truth is that we find out now about regulation being inadequate. In fact, there being no regulation in the marketplace. 6 months ago we saw Bear Stearns come down. Why didn't they bring the Banking Committee from the Senate and the House together and say, you know what, we got a problem coming down the pipe. We've got to do something with regulation. Instead, we're talking about investing $700 billion after the fact with no assurance that the small folks, the small business, that the housing, the working families that have houses at risk are going to be taken care of, and then pile the debt on our kids. So there's going to be a lot of work that has to be done over the next couple days, especially if we're going to turn this thing out by Friday.
Here's how I see this thing, Senator. Correct me if I'm wrong. The United States government is proposing in this bailout to go out and raise $700 billion on the open market by selling bonds or T-bills or whatever, to raise $700 billion. Chinese, whoever wants to buy these T-bills at whatever rate we have to pay, then taking that $700 billion and buying $700 billion worth of worthless mortgages, people that have already run out on a house that's already worth less than what they mortgaged it for. Worthless paper.
Yes.
And the United States government is going to buy $700 billion of worthless paper. Why would anybody sign such a bill? Why would you hold the American taxpayer down the next 30, 40 years to buying nothing?
Yeah, well, because we're faced with the other option that potentially the market could do some real bad things to not only Wall Street but to small businesses and working people. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place here, Chris, in that it's laying out $700 billion, hoping a program is going to work, hoping that it'll bring stability to the marketplace, hoping that people will be able to stay in their houses, or not putting it out and see how the market plays out, which may not be very pretty.
Is it going to be different tomorrow, the next day? Are we still going to have ARM balloon mortgages? Are we still going to have people encouraged to buy homes they can't afford? Are we still going to have businesses that use as assets meaningless paper because they don't have any idea why somebody would pay off a mortgage?
That's exactly why we have to have a commitment to regulation. Otherwise, this can happen again in 2 years, and this money will just be frittered away. So, I mean, that's exactly why we have to have a commitment to re-regulation in this marketplace, this financial marketplace that virtually has no regulation in it.
Okay, here's the hardball question of the night, Senator. Before you were there, so I'm not nailing you with this. Congress got in trouble years ago for what's called the bank scandal. It was average members of the House borrowing money from each other, no interest rate charged, no interest rate given. They borrowed money from each other. Didn't cost the taxpayers a cent. When that scandal broke, a lot of members of Congress were defeated. But here's a case where oversight didn't occur, it seems to me. Banking committee members like yourself over the years watching the industry, the investment banking industry, the whole gang of people up there on Wall Street. Was anybody really watching the store from your point of view, from the Senate Banking Committee? Were they really watching it, or are you guys now all blaming the regulators rather than blaming yourself for failure of oversight? What's fair here?
I'll tell you what's fair, Chris. The fact is that the administration job is to report to us on the condition of the financials of this country. They didn't do it. And the fact is that they weren't, if they knew what was going on, they didn't tell us about it, or they didn't know what was going on to tell us about it. But the fact is we can't make policy without good input, and we weren't getting good input. For the year and 3 quarters that I've been here, we certainly haven't heard about this being a problem, and that question was asked.
Well, the guy out there on the tractor out there in the West where you come from, and you get on that tractor yourself, must wonder who to trust.
I agree. I mean, absolutely. And that's why the decisions that I'm going to make in regards to this bill is going to be determined on, like I said earlier, small business working families and family farmers and ranchers, rural America. And I think Wall Street, if this bill passes, is going to be fine. I'm really concerned about those folks.